Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Alright guys, Kagura probably died in this episode. Now, this right here came off the heels of a couple of episodes ago or a couple of weeks ago when we did actually get to see the spoilers, and we found out that in the next couple of episodes, there'll probably be about 3 or 4 deaths, which is like a crazy thing to even fathom, especially in the anime canon, which again, a lot of people like to consider it quote-unquote filler. It's not. But regardless, in this particular episode, Kagura may have actually died. Now, here's the thing. We don't fully know if he's actually dead. The reason why we don't fully know if he's actually dead is because in the preview, one of them actually did say that they stitched him up, but he's still bleeding out. Because he's still bleeding, it kind of means that he's not dead. But I'd find it very, very difficult for Kagura not to actually die, because there's essentially like a dichotomy. Of course, Ikada lost his sister, or presumably lost his sister. We don't fully know if she's actually going to be dead. And of course, possibly the same thing with Kagura. We do understand that they did say that Siren wasn't necessarily able to stand anymore, something like that, in this particular episode. So they can go with the route of, hey, Kagura is going to be extremely injured, and of course, he's not going to be able to fight anymore, similar to Siren. I really do hope that they continue out and fulfill this actual Kagura death thing for a couple of reasons. The first reason being is, of course, the filler versus anime canon. The big distinction between filler and anime canon is that things can legitimately go down in anime canon, similar to Inoki dying or Sarada unlocking her second Tomo. Hypothetically, and I talked about this a couple days ago, if we exit this arc with no significant developments, it'd be all for nothing, because I personally do believe that this arc right here is a very important arc, very entertaining arc, and of course I personally do believe one of the biggest anime only arcs since, let's say, the Deepa arc, and before that, since like the Mitsuki retrieval arc, which was like a few years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And what makes it so impactful is obviously because it is Kagura. Kagura is a very good character. A lot of people love Kagura, and a lot of people are fans of Kagura. Not only that, Kagura also had a very big imprint on Boruto's life. Hypothetically, if Boruto actually does see that Kagura died in this particular episode, that's gonna shape Boruto's characteristics a little bit later on down the line. I personally do believe that right there is probably gonna affect him a lot more than, let's say, him just getting quote-unquote injured, or him just not necessarily fully dying from an attack like this. But regardless, I definitely do want to point out Kagura, he was willing to risk it all in this particular episode. If you guys do recall back, prior to him actually getting abducted by Funamushi, he was essentially using his blade and essentially putting damn near all of his chakra into his blade, and was actually prepared to die on that actual strike. Now, in my personal opinion, I never really thought that he'd potentially die from something like that, and I ended up being correct, but we definitely do have to give it up to Funamushi. In this particular episode, he showed his true colors again. One of the biggest downfalls for anime canon is, of course, developing the villains. Developing an established villain is going to be very difficult, especially in the time of Boruto, when a lot of people are used to watching characters like Ishiki Otsutsuki absolutely dominate Naruto and Sasuke, used to watching characters like Momoshiki Otsutsuki having such an impactful showing in the series, and even throwaway villains like the Kinshikis, the Urishikis, the people in the Kado organization. Those guys were such good villains, so of course for random, let's say, quote-unquote pirates to stack up to those guys, it's going to be very difficult. I remember a couple of weeks ago I did actually say that Siren was a Kage level opponent. She 100% is. That right there isn't the problem. The problem is that the fans don't actually feel like she's a Kage level opponent, and the only way to actually have the fans feel like these villains are worthy, in my personal opinion, is through action. 100%. Deepa came with the same exact stigma. People thought that Deepa was going to be very similar to Urishiki. People thought that he was going to be a very underwhelming villain, until he started to kill literally every person in sight. Siren, very good example, I just said earlier, she essentially was about, let's say, seconds away from killing Kagura and Boruto, a low Kage tier opponent, and also a Jonin level opponent, and of course no one batted an eye, mainly because of course she never really had that established repertoire. She hasn't really killed anybody. Now Funamushi in this particular episode, him potentially killing a character very close to home, him potentially killing Kagura, a very good and established skilled ninja, that right there is just going to build his repertoire, and especially everybody above him, mainly because if he himself isn't necessarily the strongest person, we could possibly assume that other characters, like, let's say, the actual Funato clan leader, could possibly easily defeat a character like Kagura in a 1v1. Now, I definitely do want to point out, we are not necessarily seeing a lot of the big dogs in action as of yet. The reason why I say that is because Boruto has yet to activate his Karma Seal, and this has to be eating Boruto up inside. If you guys don't necessarily recall, one of the last times, or excuse me, the last time that he did activate his Karma Seal, Momoshiki completely took over his body, and to the point where Boruto was actually afraid to go to sleep. So Boruto, in his mind, he's essentially thinking that he had the power to actually save Kagura, but because he's kind of afraid of Momoshiki taking over, it's of course forcing him to not necessarily use that power, and of course he's most likely struggling with it very much internally. I really do hope they actually talk about that in the next episode. We haven't necessarily seen much from Chojo. In my personal opinion, Chojo has the most to gain from an arc like this, mainly because prior to this arc, a lot of people just actually feel that he's not necessarily worthy of being quote unquote Kage, anything like that, and I personally do believe if he comes into a series like this and even proves that he's stronger than characters like Kagura, Karma Seal, Boruto hypothetically, or even like a Kawaki or Sarda, something like that, and potentially even ends the battle by himself and potentially goes on to defeat characters like the Funato clan leader Funamushi, he will 100% get a lot of respect, and I really do hope that they actually do lean a little bit more into that, mainly because again, a lot of people don't necessarily respect these current Kage, and I personally do believe a lot of them are underrated, especially Chojo. I definitely do feel like they're angling for an Ikada versus Boruto scene towards the end or the climax of this actual arc. Now, if you guys don't necessarily recall, of course, I don't necessarily talk about the anime that often, so of course I got to keep you guys up to date with the names. Ikada is the boy that Boruto met a little bit earlier, and they built a very strong friendship. Now, because Boruto essentially, I wouldn't say killed, but he was involved with injuring Siren, Ikada's sister, Ikada is most likely going to want to seek revenge on whoever injured his sister. Boruto, however, he's essentially looking at this battle as like, hey, you guys took Kagura away from me. And a very interesting thing that did actually happen in both those scenes, Ikada's eyes looked eerily similar to Boruto's eyes, and it just looked like they went black. It just looks like they were extremely angry. Now again, I definitely do think that they're angling for this battle in the future. I really do hope that Ikada, let's say, has the correct character building. One of the things that we did hear about Ikada is that he's essentially extremely strong. Siren essentially told him that he had the strongest power amongst his brothers. Now, again, we don't fully know that, and of course we didn't necessarily see that before. I really do hope that even if we don't really see Ikada fight again, they need to hammer that point home, man, because if there comes a battle with Ikada and Boruto significantly struggling versus a character like Ikada, and a lot of people forgot that Ikada had this amazing power, mainly because the last time that it was mentioned was like a month ago. It'll just be a very bad scene. I really do hope that they're probably going to handle it correctly, and I definitely do think they will. This arc, in my personal opinion, has been handled very decently. Hopefully they continue on with that stretch. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Is Kagura actually done for? But it's me, your boy RlP, and we out.
It's a knife.